Welcome back to the show, everyone. I am so glad that you're here, and I am bringing you today a very real and honest conversation around grief and loss. I'm speaking to you from this place in my life where I am sitting in a season of grief and loss. I know there are so many of you that can be able to relate to this experience, and perhaps you're also going through your own season of grief and loss, whether it's losing a loved one who's not going to be here for Christmas this year, whether it's the ending of a marriage or a relationship, or maybe a job that you lost. Maybe you retired and your career is changing in that way. Or is it possible that maybe you're grieving the loss of the way you thought life was going to be, or an identity that you've been holding on to for a very long time that is now suddenly no longer the same? I think it's valuable and important to speak to grief and loss in the way that we are experiencing this every single day. In many different moments, we experience grief and loss, making decisions to, choose black coffee over coffee with creamer, or going and doing one thing or not doing another, as we're constantly in the ebb of flow of life and grief, where our life does not look the same way that it did had we chosen to drink black coffee. And what happens when we find ourselves in the midst of these seasons of grief is that we want to get back to this place of what we call normal. And a lot of us maybe have either encouraged others or used the words ourselves of, I just want to get back to normal. I just want to get back to the way things were. And this is a very big mistake that we make in these seasons of grief, because there is no going back to the way things were. There is no going back to normal, because that normal does not exist anymore. That whether it's a loved one who's no longer here, or a relationship that's no longer viable or functioning, a job that's no longer there, and an identity that's no longer there, a life that is no longer there, we cannot fall into this place where we say, I want to go back to normal. And I think for me that this is a tough season to sit in, where things in life look very different, very confusing, unsure, lots of questions, and lots of emotions going on with all of that as well, as they do in seasons of grief and loss. But one thing I think that I am drawing strength from and coming in to realize is many different things as I go through this season is knowing that peace in all circumstances does not mean that peace only comes when life looks good for us, or life is going in the direction, in the way that we really want it to, is when we experience peace. And I will be the first one to admit and tell you that, life feels very peaceful when it's going the way that I want it to go, and things are lining up and happening in my idea of timing, or how I think it should be and what would be best. Of course it's easy to feel peace in those seasons, but it's much harder to tap into and to experience peace when things are not going our way, or when we experience some kind of loss within our lives, or we are in the midst of a season of grief. It can be very challenging to choose peace. However, as my wise mentor reminded me very recently, is that peace is unconditional. This means that despite any of the changing external circumstances, experiences, no matter what life is bringing us in the moment, is that peace is unconditional. Therefore, we can choose to have peace even in the midst of life when things are not going the way that we really wanted them to go, or we saw them going. Or when life throws you an incredibly difficult curveball situation to experience as well, is I have the power to choose what I think, to choose how I tap into this state of peace. And I've been diving into a lot of really good books that I will share with you guys. If you check out the Instagram, I will share them there with you. But kind of tapping into this season of surrender and letting go. And I think part of going through the seasons of grief are accepting things as they're happening. So not going into this wanting it to change or looking back into the past wishing things would have gone differently, but accepting the here and now where we are and accepting what has happened, and choosing to pull my mind out of the past and not get stuck in this method of looking backwards, and realizing that looking backwards and trying to paddle up the river is not getting me anywhere. And in fact, what we see that often happens is we get stuck. We get stuck in these experiences, and we're kind of stuck in the midst of the river, using an incredible amount of energy, but finding that we're going nowhere. But what's really incredible is if we can just pull our paddle back up into the boat and allow the river to flow naturally, maybe making slight adjustments here or there, but we just allow the river to flow in its natural rhythm, is how much easier it feels to navigate that. Even when things feel incredibly difficult or we feel confused or lost, is that peace in all circumstances really is surrendering to what is going on and being incredibly present through that. So I want to share a little paragraph from Michael Singer's book, The Surrender Experience, that has really helped put a lot of this into perspective for me. So here's what he says is, I could see that the practice of surrender was actually done in two very distinct steps. First, you let go of the personal reactions of like and dislike that form inside your mind and your heart. And the second, with the resultant sense of clarity, you simply look to see what is being asked of you by the situation unfolding in front of you. What would you be doing if you weren't being influenced by the reactions of like or dislike? Following that deeper guidance will take your life into a very different direction from where your preferences would have led you. This is the clearest I can explain my surrender experience, and it became the foundation of both my spiritual and worldly life. And this really resonated, rang true for me, in that I find myself in a lot of these situations, whether it is grief or loss or just situations in general, is putting a label on it with like or dislike. Is I really like that the sun is out today, or I really don't like that it's raining. And I'm putting these labels to these experiences of like or dislike. And what's happening when I do this is it's automatically forming this perception, this judgment of the experience within my own mind. And this is where we can fall into these pitfalls of not accepting what is happening, not surrendering, but also it doesn't allow us to just sit and be in our grief, to live our grief out. Because we are biologically wired away from pain and towards pleasures, of course, our conscious mind is going to do anything that it can to try to make the subconscious mind feel better. And it doesn't like sitting in the seasons, the moments that are uncomfortable, or that maybe have sadness, or they have anger, or they have grief, or resentment, or whatever is showing up in that. Is we're wired to move away from that. And I think the important part, and what's been very important for me in sitting in this season and being in this season of grief, is allowing me to live my grief and allowing me to have my authentic emotional experience to it without putting a like or a dislike to the title of what's going on. So if in the moment I'm feeling sad, great, I'm feeling sad. I'm consciously aware of what I'm feeling. If I'm feeling peace, if I'm feeling happy, is that there is no wrong emotional experience going through these seasons of grief and loss. What we do wrong is we don't allow ourselves to do that. We don't allow ourselves to experience the authentic emotions because they can be really uncomfortable. And we have to allow that discomfort to be there. We have to allow ourselves to just witness what's going on and be very present as we're doing that, and realizing that when we don't resist things, when we don't push them down, is that those emotions are going to flow and move naturally on their own. And this is a very important part of going through the grief and loss process, no matter what this looks like for any of us, is that we have to allow those emotions to move. When we choose to resist them, they're only going to get stronger and bigger, guaranteed. When we choose to push them down, to suppress them, which is what most of us do, is push it down, is that it's only going to cause us disease and problems and ultimately feeling depressed because you're not allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling. You've got to allow yourself to live your grief. You've got to allow yourself to not fall into this ideal that you need to get back to normal, to hurry up and get back to normal, because you have to figure out what life looks like in the here and now that things are different, and now that life probably looks different than what you thought it was going to. The other part of this I think that is really important, it's been helpful for me moving through this season of grief as well, is finding a purpose. Is knowing, I know deep down in my heart what my purpose is. It's the mission to end the suffering. And that even in the midst of grief and loss, is I need to allow that to be there. I need to allow myself to move through the season of grief and loss, but that doesn't mean that my mission does not continue. That doesn't mean that I still don't continue moving forward, even if it's one very small step at a time, is I'm allowing it to be there as it is, but I'm continuing in the movement forward. And this, I think, is very important, because this leads into what Michael Singer was talking about, is what would you be doing if you weren't being influenced by your reactions? Is how would you be maybe showing up differently in this season of grief if you weren't influenced by the like or dislike? And understanding that these seasons of grief and loss are some of our biggest growth and expansion seasons, the ones where we are really challenged to just surrender and let go, is where we see exponential growth within ourselves. We see an incredible support system show up, because you are never alone going through these seasons of grief. And in my own experience, I've had amazing support show up for me in so many different ways. And it's been an incredible experience of allowing people to show up for me as well, as I often show up for everyone else. Is now this grief, this teacher of mine, is showing me how to allow others to really authentically show up for me. And that has been one of the most incredible lessons that I have ever learned and am ever experiencing in the moment. So I invite you, in whatever season you are, if you are in a season of grief and loss in any kind of way, is just accept what is going on, surrender to this, and allow it to just be what it is. Allow yourself to live out this season of grief. I like to use the word season a lot, and I use it for myself and I use it for others that I do work with, is that realizing that nothing will last forever. It's impossible, that everything is changing, and we don't often realize this so simply in the way that the sun rises and the sun sets without us doing anything about it. Is knowing that this season that you're in will not last for forever. And if it's hard, if it's sad, if it's confusing, if it's causing doubt, if it's causing you to question anything, then that is an incredible teacher for you. It's showing you areas of growth within yourself, within your life, where you can grow and expand in ways that you may have never tapped into without this specific experience. So I want you to know that if you're in this season of grief and loss, I am there with you. I feel you. I know that this can be incredibly challenging and incredibly hard. But I offer these simple words of wisdom that have been passed down to me, is that peace in all circumstances is knowing that you're capable to do anything that you need to do, is that you are fully capable to move through this season of grief, that you are capable to get through whatever it is that's showing up in your life that may be causing these feelings, these situations to not be ideally what you thought they would. You are fully capable to get through it. And that peace in all circumstances is not conditional. Peace is not determined on how well things are going on the outside or how well things are going on the inside. But peace in all circumstances is knowing that you can be okay, you can be at peace through any situation that you have going on, no matter what that looks like for you in your life. And I really genuinely invite you to tap into that peace. And if you're asking yourself the question of like, I don't even know what that feels like, I can't even imagine what that feels like, is perfect. You're in the perfect place, because you have to have a beginner's mind and you have to start somewhere. And I am fully here to help support you or guide you in the right direction, or invite you to start checking out books like The Surrender Experience or Peace in All Circumstances or Fearless Living, things like this, where you can start to learn what this deep state of inner peace really is. And I just invite you so deeply to keep your heart open this season, to allow yourself to feel exactly what you're feeling, to be very consciously aware of what is showing up for you, but you're not pushing it down, you're not resisting it, you're not doing anything with it, but you're just being aware and you just allow it to be there. I am sending everyone so much love and light this season, and I hope that you find those moments of joy, even in the midst of your grief and loss, is finding the simple moments of joy as well, and that you are really open to experiencing this divine journey of life that we are all on. And most of all, knowing that you are not alone, that you never go on this journey alone, that there are people surrounding you and resources to help you move through these very complicated and difficult seasons. I am wishing you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'm so excited and honored to walk this journey with you. And please, if you are in this season and you need some help, please do not wait to reach out. There are so many ways that you can move through this grief, and it will be your greatest teacher. Go out there, everybody, and spread the love and light and joy that you have in your heart, and I will look forward to sitting around the fire with you again so very soon.